Alrighty, Magnamon and Armor Rush fans, it's time that we cover the updated version for the deck for BT9. And here's my personal best build that I'd like to share with all you guys. Just before we get started with the video, I got something really cool to share with all of you guys. If you haven't watched our newest Battle of series with Mario, then be sure to check that out as well. In our latest Battle of X Records series, you will get to see me play the Alphamon X Antibody deck, putting it in action, and playing against Mario's Red X Antibody Omnimon deck. Come watch the epic clash of the Royal Knights to find out who comes out on top. Links will be left in the description box down below or the iCard on the top right here. Hello Digimon players and fans, welcome back to another Digimon deck profile and in-depth building guide video. Like I promised from my BT8 Armor Rush video, I've been hyping up the brand new Magnamon X Antibody quite a bit. We all know that Armor Rush is a very aggressive deck and it can take down your opponent's securities relatively fast. Sometimes it can be so fast that it can actually outpace all the other decks in the current format and in the meta as well. One of the weaknesses of Armor Rush from before is that it can run out of gas very quickly. Potential bricks in the early game is also a very huge weakness of it as well. But it also has a lack of defense before, where all you can do is just attack and attack and attack, but you don't really have too much of stopping your opponent's plays other than having a Magnamon blocker on the board. Now, with the inclusion of Magnamon X, it provides a whole new dynamic. It can fill the gap in for defense, which is really what we're trying to focus on. Whether it is in the early game or late game, Magnamon X always provides you great value when you can put it down. In the early game, it can slow down the pace to give you some time so that it can draw your combo pieces bit by bit instead, and then go ham later on. On the other hand, it can act as a reliable top-end boss Digimon to prevent some of your decks from going all out with their OTK combos later in the game. So basically, whenever you get to play it, it's always good value. Fundamentally, the core build hasn't changed too much from before, but I have been experimenting with very different various ratios with the deck to try to make it as perfect as possible. So let's show you guys what we got. Starting with the Digi-8 cards, we have the 4 copies of Alphamon. Draw power is my priority in this deck. We all know that Armor Rush kind of lacks that generally, which is why we want to try to get Alphamon as much as we can. It's always great that our opponent has a Digimon with no sources, so when we swing in, we can draw that card, and that's what we really need it for generally, and this is the best egg to run for the time being. Now, just before we continue with the video, I want to take a quick moment to thank each and every one of you guys for watching and supporting the channel. You guys have been absolutely amazing. The Digimon community is just so fantastic, and if you're watching right now and have not subscribed yet, I definitely encourage you to do so because it just helps the channel a lot, and that is because we got lots of Digimon deck profiles, videos, and content to cover, and this is the place to be if you want to watch amazing stuff. So definitely turn that notification bell while you're at it to stay tuned. Don't forget to give this video a like, as I just really appreciate all of you. Starting with our rookies, and all our rookies are just Veemons because it's Armor Rush, so you have to play Veemons. We have the good old classic Jamming Veemon. We got the 4 copies of it right here. Jamming Veemon is just great for early aggression, early chips, and it just cannot be deleted by security battle, which is why it's so good. Not only that, it actually combos very nicely with a lot of our armor purge effects as well, allowing our checks to continue to go through, and then we can go into another armor once over and over again. And later in the combo segment, I will showcase a little bit on how this all works together, and yeah, 4 copies is definitely a must-have. Next, let's talk about our searching Veemons. We have 3 copies of the starter deck Veemon here, which is from the Imperiumon starter deck, and then we got another 3 copies of the BT8 Veemon. Starter deck Veemon grabs you a free, which is basically almost anything in this deck. But however, do keep in mind that you guys, that Magnamon X Antibody, just jumping ahead, is not a free. It does not have free in its traits, meaning that Veemon, this one in particular, the starter deck one, cannot grab it. However, this is why we start to bump up the other Veemon from BT8. Originally, I didn't really like it as much, but however, there's more double color cards that you can be adding nowadays, and there's more targets to hit. which is why this Veemon is going to be a little bit better too, because you're revealing the top 4, adding a 2-color blue Digimon card so that you can actually add the Magnamon X, any of the armors, as well as your tamers and options, which is why this 3-in-3 ratio seems to work very, very nicely for what I've been working with so far. Then we got another starter deck Veemon where we have the All-Force Veemon starter deck Veemon here. This one, it does warping if our opponent has a level 6 or higher. It doesn't really come up as often. We don't even play the All-Force Veemon, just letting you guys know. So we never really use that main effect. So once again, like I mentioned in so many of my other videos, this Veemon is really dedicated for its inheritable for the early game of when attacking, not once per turn as well. If we have 7 or fewer cards, we can draw one, which is always very nice. Like I mentioned, draw power is very crucial for this deck to get into our more pieces, and generally Armor Rush does lack a lot of that, which is why this card helps a lot. Last but not least, I have 2 EX1 Veemons, and this is pretty good because it has an inheritable of your turn once per turn. When you do unsuspend this Digimon, you gain a memory back. We do a little bit of that combos. You guys probably remember from my Armor Rush deck profile back in BT8. We do quite a bit of unsuspending. We do have Magnamon that unsuspends. We have the tamers of Davis and Ken that lets you unsuspend as well, and possibly as well as armor texture, which is why this card does come in handy, which is very nice as well. Okay, let's talk about our level 4s, which are basically our armor guys. First and foremost, of course, we have the 4 copies of Magnamon. He is a blocker, has the armor purge, which is really, really great. We're always going to be digivolving for 3 on top of a Veemon, and then it also has when digivolving, gaining a lot of DP. Later in the game, it's just even better, so it can get super, super strong and super beefy as a blocker itself. Not only that, it can unsuspend when you're digivolving, allowing you to make multiple checks, multiple swings during the same turn as well, if you can ever do that. It's just a really, really good card that you always must have at a 4 for sure. Next, there's 4 copies of Lydramon. This is just really, really great. Once again, it has Armor Purge, digivolving for 2 on top of a Veemon. When digivolving, we can suspend one of our opponent's level 4 or lower Digimon, so we can do a little bit of control aspects, swing over the level 4s with it, which is always really nice. And not only that, we do need the green and blue sources for playing Megadeth, alongside with comboing very nicely with Ken and Davis as well to gain a lot of memory and advantages, which is why Lydramon at 4 copies is still a very good sustain choice. Now this is more of a different change, but we do only now run 3 copies of Flamedramon. The main reason why this card isn't as great as before is because of the extra 3000 DP buff. Making it 8k isn't as relevant as useful in this current format, and just juggling with all my ratio wise and experimenting, I just rather take out 1 more copy of this and use that card as another slot to play something else a little bit more useful, and that's sort of how I want to go about it overall. Then last but not least, to round off for the level 4s, we do play 2 Lobomons right here. I love doing the Lobo for game. We have enough space for this deck to sort of fit 2 in here, which is why it's really, really great. And yeah, that's the reason why I play 2. That's it for all the level 4s. Let's talk about level 5s. We only have 1 copy of level 5, which is the 1 copy of Chimeramon. This is a really good extender and bridge to give you sort of an alternative way to get into your level 6, such as your Magnamon level X. And however, I don't feel like I really need to do a lot of DNA this format, simply because the armor package itself is really, really strong. I want to focus a little bit more on like a rookie rush and an early stage and make a lot of swing style instead. So just 1 Chimeramon just fits nicely as sort of like a one-off tech to do some extra combos when we need to. And then of course, now let's move into our level 6, which we have our brand new boss Digimon off the deck right here, which we have Magnamon X. Now he does a whole lot of things, which is really, really cool. First, you can digivolve for 3 on top of a level 5, and it could either digivolve on top of a yellow level 5 or a blue level 5, which is pretty neat. Otherwise, we're always mostly going to be digivolving it for 4 on top of a Magnamon, skipping the level 5 requirement, which is really, really nice. Now, its first thing is its opponent's turn, which is very interesting. When an opponent's Digimon attacks, and if a card with armor form is in this traits or X Antibody is in this Digimon's Digivolution cards, you can switch the attack target to this card, whether it is unsuspended or suspended, which is why this card is really good. It's like a pseudo blocker, infinite amount of times I can continuously block, making it very difficult for your opponent to play around against some matchups on decks. And it really just slows down the game and allows you to sort of pick up the pace back and then sort of go aggressive with your other armor cards while doing so. Now, it has another effect. All turns when this Digimon would be deleted, whether by battle or by security or even by effects, you can simply just prevent the deletion by moving this card into the top of your security face down instead. And really the whole idea is that this guy provides you that defensive capability which Armor Rush did not have in the last formats and the previous formats so far, and this is why this card is just so good, so that you can synergize with your other armor strategies and your armor can just swing aggressively along with this card while having this as your defensive kit mechanism. That's it for all of our Digimon. Let's talk about Tamers. Tamers, I just have 2 Davises and 3 Davis Kens. 2 Davises is just really crucial. Memory setter, searching, we all know why this card is just incredibly useful and incredibly vital to many decks. Davis and Ken, mainly giving us extra memory during our turn. We usually have a blue Digimon on board, so we can always get that one extra memory. Having multiple copies gives us a lot of value. Like I mentioned earlier, especially when we have Lydramon on the board, we can gain so much from it. However, the other part, like I mentioned in my other armor deck video so far, is really to utilize its second effect, which gives a lot of value. When one of your Digimon does digivolve into a Digimon with 2 more colors, you can suspend this Tamer to unsuspend that Digimon, so that you can do your Armor Rush combos over and over again, as long as you have the memory to continue to do so, which is why these cards are just very, very nice to have. That's it for all the Tamers. Let's talk about options. As we all know, Armor Rush has a lot of options in the deck. So first and foremost, I'm trying something very new and interesting here. This may not be original, or this may be surprising or not too surprising to some of you guys, but I'm actually currently playtesting out 4 copies of Blue Memory Boost right here. Now, the main reason is because, like I mentioned, Armor Rush does tend to brick quite a bit. And even with the large amount of rookies that we're running in a deck, you'd be surprised on how much this deck still bricks. The reason is because of the ratios of all your other cards other than the rookies are either your level 4s, a bunch of level 6s, just a couple of it, and then everything else is a tamer and options. This is why the reason why it bricks. However, this option can be treated as sort of like a hard play rookie, allowing you to search for pieces that you need and also delaying and gaining your memory later, which is why it's really, really good. Just jumping ahead and letting you guys know, I actually don't play any Hammer Sparks in this current build, and you guys might think I'm crazy and wild, but I'm trying this out right now and it's been working very, very nicely, simply because my theory is that I'd rather have the extra delay to gain 2 memory, to make even more plays, and to do my unsuspending combos with the Davis and Ken. And Blue Memory Boost has just absolutely been fantastic so far. Next, for the aggressive one, we have to have Fire Rocket, giving us extra security +1. Every time I see this card in the early stages of the game, I easily just win and get so aggressive where we can just swing in for so many checks very, very fast, and our opponent just can't deal with it and just can't keep up no more. 3 copies is really all you need. 4 gets a little bit clunky and very bricky, and its security effect is really not that great in this current format, but unless you delete a blocker, which does come up sometimes, but not really like that useful. However, we really want to see this card in our hand so that we can play it with our armor to give it security +1 is really what it's all about. Next, we have 2 copies of this brand new yellow option, which is dedicated for Magnamon X, Awakening of the Golden Knight. Now, that's a lot of text to read. But first and foremost, it's really all about if you have a Digimon in armor form and its traits, you can play this card without meeting the color requirements, just like all your other armors options. And then what it really lets you do is that it lets you digivolve one of your Digimon with armor in its form into a Magnamon from your hand, ignoring its Digivolution requirements. And then without paying its memory cost as well, so that Digimon digivolve with this effect also cannot have its DP reduced by your opponent's effects until the end of your opponent's next turn. So there's a lot to digest here. Really, the main idea is that you would have your level 4 armor, and then you just simply play this card and you can digivolve it straight into a Magnamon X Antibody, or if you want to be a little bit more creative, you can also digivolve it into a Magnamon afterwards, really stacking some armor plays, which is really, really cool. And then once again, the other thing is it cannot have its DP reduced. Having the DP reduction protection is fairly nice when you're against those matchups as well. It also has a security effect which runs totally different to its main effect, where you return a card with Magnamon with its name from your trash back to your hand, and then you get to add this card to your hand, which is why it sets you up for the next turn so that you can do your armor plays with this specific option, is why this option is actually really, really good. Then I have 1 copy of Armor Texture. I still really like the sort of changing your armor capability, and then you can unsuspend and swing again for this one singular option, which is always just very nice. But with the Awakening of the Golden Knight, We didn't have to play as many copies of this compared to the last format because we want to utilize the Awakening of the Golden Knight instead. So I really like this as just a one-off tech generally, which has worked out very nicely. And its security effect does let us play a Veemon from our trash, which is also really good. And we do get to use its on-play effect as well afterwards. Then for our defensive options, I have 2 Megadefs. I'm personally not a huge fan of running 3 or 4. Seeing it on my hand feels a little bit too clunky. It really does feel like a dead card unless we actually run into the perfect situation. However, 2 is definitely a minimum that you gotta play. You gotta have a bit of defensive capabilities to combat some of the OTK decks right here, which is why, 2 is really good enough. And then last but not least, I have 1 Ice Wall. Again, for defensive capabilities, great security effect of Hammer Spark gaining 2 memory, but also just slowing down our opponent's plays for 1 turn, buying us time. And buying us 1 turn of defensive really helps Armor Rush. And sometimes that really does matter because that will actually help you win the game as well. That's it for our 50 card main deck. Let's first talk about a few other cards we can consider adding into this deck as well. However, there's really not that many. First and foremost, I do have 1 Madoki Betamon. There's a lot of memory gaining effects currently in this format. Madoki Betamon is a really good floodgate to stop that. However, the reason I didn't play it is because I just want to keep up the consistency with my armors and having Veemon so we can always consistently Digivolve it for the lower cost is the reason why. And I don't really want to screw up that kind of consistency. Next, I always will put this as a suggestion. As long as we play the first Veemon Star Deck Veemon, I would always throw this in. I have seen people play this. It does actually work sometimes, which is pretty cool because first Veemon can swing multiple times, which is really good. It can bounce things. It's actually not too bad. However, paying the 4 to sort of warp into it sometimes, and it's very conditional. So meaning that most of the times when you see this card in your hand, you don't really get the opportunity to really play it, which is why I don't really like to include this card overall. However, this next card, I think is a really good considerable tech, and that's 1 Imperiumon Paladin mode. Paladin mode actually works very nicely in this deck because you can Digivolve it on top of Magnamon X, and you have quite a couple of sources that are 2 color for you to sort of discard and then utilize Imperiumon's Paladin mode's effect quite often, which is actually really, really nice. In the odd matchup against certain decks, Paladin mode would actually just be the complete rock star and will just make the matchup so much easier. But once again, I don't feel like I really need it. I want more consistency and fast pace instead. That's how I like to play this deck, so that's why I didn't include it. Last but not least, we talked about this earlier in the video. We have 1 Hammer Spark. Well, not 1 Hammer Spark, but just Hammer Spark in general. It's quite crucial for blue decks. However, like I mentioned, I've been playtesting with blue memory boost instead, and it's been working out great and fantastic for me. It helps me in brick, which is what I really need to see. It helps me pick up my pace a little bit faster and provides me a lot of value with delay. However, Hammer Spark is still really good, simply because of its security effect. It is a defensive mechanism. It can potentially stop your opponents from OTKing you as well, passing the turn back, which is really, really crucial and really important. So that's really just another suggestion to, for you guys to keep in mind when you're playing Armor Rush. So that wraps up for all the cards that I want to showcase and talk about for the deck. Now let's showcase you guys a few quick combos that are how you want to really be playing this deck overall. So there's no fancy OTK combos in Armor Rush overall. It's not an OTK based deck, but it is a fast paced, quick sort of Rookie Rush style or Armor Rush style deck, hence being it called that name. So early stages, you do want to hatch your egg. Your Digivolving targets are usually going to be these Veemons right here. The jamming one, the one that lets you draw, or otherwise it's the unsuspending one. Digivolve these ones, but let's go for the jamming one since we're most likely wanting to see this combo most of the time. And then while at the same time, you want to be playing, hard playing these guys so then they can help you search, which is pretty funny because Blue Memory Boost is technically, I like to call it another different Veemon because there's a Veemon in the art as well, but gives you the delay memory boost overall. And however, one thing to really keep in mind is as soon as you see sort of a level 4 of any kind, let's just say Flamedramon, that's the armor, plus Fire Rocket, you just want to go into this combo as soon as possible. And 1 memory is all you need because you usually want to be going first with this deck. And it's kind of unusual because a lot of decks in Digimon want to go second, but Armor Rush you actually want to go first, so then you can make the first swing and start going aggressive right off the bat. So in your first turn, you probably pass your opponent to 2 because you Digivolve into Flamedramon. Let's ignore these cards over here. Your opponent would most likely pass you back to 1, and 1 really is all you need because you just need 1 memory to play Fire Rocket. So you just move this guy up right off the bat, and you would then play your Fire Rocket for 1, giving your Flamedramon extra security plus 1. And then what's next is you would swing into your opponent's security with Flamedramon. Alphamon will let you draw a card if your opponent has something that's just like a rookie on the board with no sources, which is great. Ideally, we want to see that. Flame Dramon will swing in for 8k 2 checks. And let's just say the first check is something that's like 15,000 DP in the security. Immediately, Flame Dramon's going to have to purge right here, and Veemon's going to be here. This is the reason why the jamming Veemon is really, really good, because here the Fire Rocket still sustains. The Fire Rocket will still continue to give the second check to go through. However, you have jamming, so you do have the protection, which is really nice. And also a cool side note is that the Digimon still also retains underneath the extra 3000 DP, although it doesn't really matter in this particular case. But if you have another different Veemon overall, like this one or this one, you know, they do become 5k until the end of the turn as well. So that's it for the number one very basic combo. Otherwise, if you don't see your armor, you just use your Veemon and just keep on chipping as much as you can. Your opponent has to address this card eventually at some point, because if they don't, every single turn, they're just going to keep losing one security over and over again. And then moving on to the second combo, most of us have seen this and know how to play this combo a lot. But again, just wanted to showcase you guys the basic cores of why this Davis and Ken is super, super good. So once again, you want to have an armor ready. You just push it out. Your opponent will pass you a little bit more memory. You're going to need a little bit more. The more you have, the better, generally. So then once again, you would just swing in with your Flame Dramon. This time no Fire Rocket, doesn't really matter. If you have it, it's great. And then let's just say your Flame Dramon does get deleted in security battle, you would purge it, and then your Veemon is suspended. Afterwards, then what's next is you want to have another access to another different armor Digimon from your hand, so then you can pay the 2 memory to digivolve it into Lydramon. Lydramon will then actually unsuspend, because you get to suspend your Davis and Ken to unsuspend it, and you can swing again. Now, in this case, if you imagine like if you had a bit more memory to work with, and if you had Fire Rocket, that can total up to 4 checks in one go, and that's just absolutely wild and crazy. And free memory is really all you need, and it doesn't require a whole lot of setup, because all you need is Davis Ken, 2 armors, and a Fire Rocket, and ready to go. And this is why this combo gets even more wilder as it does, because if you have multiple Davis and Kens and you have more memory to work with, let's just say continue-wise, you can repeat this combo over and over again while you have more armors. You can then say Lydramon does get deleted by the battle right here, and then you get to go pay 2 once again to go into another Flame Dramon that you have in your hand, suspend a second Davis and Ken to unsuspend it, swing again, and then repeat, rinse and repeat again and again with whichever armor you have. And also, meanwhile, if you do have any of these Veemons with the inheritables, also really great. With this one unsuspending, you gain a memory once per turn. This one will let you draw more cards as you go if you have 7 or less, really giving you a lot of value with these. However, once again, the jamming one is actually the more ideal one, especially if you do have Fire Rocket, and that is the second basic combo there. And then now let's talk about the strategies of how you want to be playing the new combos with Magnamon X Antibody, as well as Awakening of the Golden Knight right here. Once again, your opponent just passes you to whatever memory they have. Let's just say you have 1. You move up the Flame Dramon and you just swing. That's all you really need to do. Just swing into their security as much as you can. Now, let's just assume Flame Dramon survives the battle, which is great, because if it does, what you can do is you can play Awakening of the Golden Knight and then pay the 3 memory and then just go straight into a Magnamon X Antibody. And then there you have a defensive card right here, and your opponent's going to have to deal with this. This is going to block everything. And what I was talking about earlier, while this guy is your protective defense mechanism, you can play these Veemons and not have to worry about your opponent trying to delete them somehow or try to run over them. They're going to have to use effects to delete these guys instead. So you have good protection here. And in certain matchups, this works very, very nicely and just controls the boards just from 1 card. Now, alternatively, there's other funkier ways you can sort of play this. Instead of going into your Magnamon X Antibody, you can actually go into Magnamon here, because it does say Magnamon in its name. So it's really awkward because you're digivolving a level 4 on top of a level 4, but that's totally fine because it works. It lets you do that, and this helps you really nicely. Why is it good? Because, well, Magnamon will get to unsuspend. It will be a blocker, also a very good defensive mechanism. And then once again, the more double color armors that you have in your trash, the more DP it gains. Keep in mind, once again, Magnamon doesn't count because it actually is not a armor form in its trait either. However, that's totally fine. You know, you just need 2, and then there you go. You have an 11k blocker right there until you end your opponent's next turn. Now, the even cooler thing is now moving back to your next turn. Afterwards, your opponent puts you to 1. You can swing in with Magnamon. If it gets deleted, you can purge it, and there's still a level 4 here to continue the purge. If it survives, then it's great, because you can actually now stack up another one, where you have Magnamon X Antibody by paying the floor cost, passing your opponent to 3, and then you have like a pretty cool, interesting stack to sort of play around. Now, why is this really good once again is because if this guy is in threat, gets deleted, put it into security. And still, they have to go through all the different armors. It's like building a really cool armor over armor stack right here, which is a very interesting way to play. And it does work out sometimes, which is quite funky. But yeah, that basically wraps up for all the different combos I want to showcase you guys on how to play Magnamon and Armor Rush with the new Magnamon X Antibody inclusion as well. That will conclude for my very own deck building strategy and in-depth building guide for the Magnamon X Antibody deck profile. If you guys enjoyed the video and found it helpful, please give it a like. If you have any suggestions, recommendations, or questions, be sure to share it with everyone in the comments down below. Overall, the brand new Magnamon X Antibody is a very strong deck. You feel like that you're going very fast when you play the deck, and it is actually really important to keep that mentality as you play it. It is also very beginner friendly, and I highly recommend you guys to give it a try, especially if you're new to the Digimon card game. So that will wrap up for the video for today. Now I know many of you guys have been requesting for many other deck profiles to be featured, and don't you guys worry, I've been cooking up a bunch of other recipes at the same time. Just a quick sneak peek, we'll be finally covering Magnamon and Omnimon for our next deck profile video. And if you guys can't wait for that, you know what you gotta do. Subscribe right now and turn on that notification bell so you guys know as soon as that video drops. As always, thank you so much for watching. You guys have a great day, great night, wherever you are. See you next video. And this is Avault, signing out.